The current trend amongst car companies is to try and make everything carbon neutral. This thing where, in theory, you're not putting as much bad stuff into the atmosphere as you normally would. It kind of evens out with these very frugal and very efficient engines. I think that's how it works. I'm not an scientist. It's divisive, I know. But with fuel prices going up, the cost of living going up, and, well, everything else, a car that's more frugal on fuel is a good thing. It's just that buying in is mighty expensive. It's just the way things are. Formula E serves as the FIA's all-electric single-seat series, and there's now an all-hydrogen series called Extreme H, which has either started or is starting. I think Katie Munnings is doing it from what I've seen on her Instagram. But it seems that alternative means of propulsion are getting some proper investment, as divisive as that is, so I'll move on before people start complaining. But even in the 2000s, there were concerns about the rising costs in motorsport, and also some glances towards things like climate change, sustainability, cost-cutting, and everything else besides. And we like to think that this is all a new thing and very 2025, but in the 2000s, Formula One was looking at this and thinking, how can we sort this out? Because, for those that weren't around, there was a brief period where Bernie and Max were looking at things and going, bugger. Now I know I've told this part a million times before, but I have to assume that everybody is new. It's just the way of YouTube. But it's also a recap for those who haven't been here in a while as well. So, at the beginning of the 2000s, two privateer teams in Prost and Arrows vanished from the grid. Prost at the end of an abysmal 2001 season, and Arrows going bust midway through 2002. Arrows was a long-standing team, while Prost was a continuation of the historic Ligier team. So we can call that two historic teams if you really want to. Toyota joining the grid helped the numbers stabilise, but the grid had dropped from 22 down to 20 cars either way. If Toyota hadn't joined, it would have been 18 cars. On top of this, Jordan and Minardi were sliding further and further back because the manufacturers were signing blank cheques. That is, except for Ford. Ford didn't really give a shit because the car was painted green and not blue and white. If Prost and Arrows had survived, the 2003 season would have had 24 cars. Instead, it had 20. If Jordan and Minardi went, the grid would have been down to 16, and with nobody wanting to fill the grid in response, at least from a privateer standpoint, Formula One would have been a bit screwed, and embarrassed at the same time. If Sauber somehow bit the bullet, that's 14 cars. The manufacturers joining in had been a big boom for the sport in terms of attracting people, because then people could follow their favourite brands, much like we do in GT3 and Hypercar now, but the plucky privateer was as much a part of the sport as the big boys were. Now, much like it had been in the latter days of LMP1, GT1, DTM in the 90s and the late 2010s, who was going to want to join in? The financial outlay was just not worth it. Mercedes' beryllium alloy piston ban probably didn't help things, because after that, Mercedes, Ferrari, BMW, Ford, Honda, Renault and Toyota started sinking millions into the next lightweight wonder alloy for the engines, with Ferrari going down the ceramics route. But for Jordan and Minardi, they had to make do, being that they were customer teams and privateers. As mentioned in the Sauber Petronas retrospective video, Sauber had the good fortune of having pretty significant shareholders and were essentially building clones of the previous year's Ferrari, which was the best car on the grid for 5 straight years. They at least had a safety net. So with Jordan and Minardi needing something to keep themselves afloat and to keep the grid numbers up, Bernie and Max started looking at things to try and improve things financially for Formula One, or at least improve the financial stability. The costs needed stabilising, and they needed stabilising fast. In 2004, the engines had to last a whole weekend, so the richer teams in Ferrari, McLaren, Williams, Renault and Toyota couldn't use qualifying specific engines anymore, so the teams had to find balance. In 2005 this was changed to 2 full weekends, so now the teams couldn't run them as hot as they normally would, and this actually did 2 things. It encouraged reliability as well as trying to reduce the costs, because the teams wouldn't be buying as many engines. At least, in theory. Because how many Hondas did McLaren pop in 2015 when they were limited to 5 engines a year? And in this same time period, Honda, partnered with BAR in 2004, were doing okay, all things considered. While Ferrari cruised to another Drivers' and Constructors' title, Jenson Button began to show that he'd actually got something and scored 10 podiums on his way to 3rd in the standings, with BAR finishing 2nd overall in the Constructors. which felt fantastic for BAR and for Honda, because after all this time, it felt like they were getting somewhere. In 2005 though, it all fell apart, because BAR were disqualified from the San Marino Grand Prix for the iffy fuel tank they had and were then banned for 2 races. Then they had to withdraw from the US Grand Prix because of Tiregate. But after that, the car steadily improved, with Button eventually finishing 9th overall, while Sato in the other car could only muster 1 single point. But for 2006, jackpot. Honda had fully taken over BAR by this point, and the team was rewarded with a race victory for Button at the Hungarian Grand Prix. It was Honda's first victory since the early 1990s. I mean, sort of, because Mugen winning races in 96, 98 and 99, and it was Button's first victory after so many races of trying. Both drivers also finished well within the top 10 in the championship. At the same time, the horrendous 2005 season was largely forgotten, and the 2006 car put them back in reach of the likes of Renault, Ferrari and McLaren. But in 2007, things were going to change. Not only were the regulations tightened up with regards to sponsorship, but Honda was also going in a different direction. On track, and off it. In terms of road cars, Toyota was ahead of the game with the Prius, which has become synonymous with hybrids like the Ford Transit has to vans. It's a mighty popular car. By March 2008, Toyota had sold nearly 1.2 million examples of the second-gen version of that car. That's a lot. It was very popular in North America as well, partly due to California's emission standards, and became very popular as a taxi in the UK because it was dodging the congestion zone charges with its lower emissions. So Honda couldn't just sit there and let Toyota get away with it. Honda, in response, released the Insight. Toyota got the Prius out in 1997, with Honda responding 2 years later in 1999. And no, this isn't AI, it actually looked like that. Thankfully they improved the aesthetics over time. But it wasn't Honda's first foray into clean vehicles, because the natural gas powered Civic GX first appeared in 1998. But the Insight never caught on like the Prius did. By 2007, only 200,000 Insights were sold, worldwide. Part of the reason was, it was a bit too quirky. But Honda was doing a lot of things around this time to try and figure out how to look to the future and be ahead of the game. Their slogan is the power of dreams after all. But at the end of 2006, sponsorship in Formula 1 was changing. With the European Union banning tobacco advertising and other countries doing the same, Formula 1 was ready to instigate its own tobacco ban for 2007. West had already departed McLaren by this point and been replaced by Vodafone. Mild 7 was gone from Renault at the end of 2006 to be replaced by the Dutch bank ING. Jordan was gone at the end of 2005, so no more Benson and Hedges, and Williams had ditched tobacco at the end of 1999 with the BMW partnership ushering in a new tech-based image. So with it all said and done, only Ferrari had tobacco branding, but even then, there were only 3 races in 2007 where they were allowed to show the full Marlboro logos. They ran full logos again in 2008, but only in testing. And then the Marlboro logos disappeared for good. Honda, meanwhile, had lost its sponsorship from British American Tobacco, so the Lucky Strike logos were going to be gone from the start of 2007. So, like all the other teams that had tobacco sponsorship, Honda had to find some new sponsorship. But instead of doing that, they decided to take things to the extreme. They decided, we're not going to go out and find ourselves a new title sponsor. We're going to put a giant earth on the car instead. Liveries are quite important to some people, and we see it every single year when the cars are released. And I think the teams are leaning into this obsession that people have with the cars being painted up, with livery concepts on Instagram proving quite popular. Boring, same as last year, is usually the complaint. Almost like these brands have a corporate identity. Imagine if social media existed in the 1990s and McLaren turned up with yet another white car with a red chevron on the nose. Boring, same as last year. But much like the teams do these days, there was a livery launch at the Natural History Museum in London. And I don't know what people were expecting, because what turned up wasn't what people expected. So Honda had built this Formula 1 car, but instead of going with their traditional white and red, they'd painted the earth on it against the backdrop of space. The only branding on the car was on the nose. The Honda logo, the Bridgestone logo, and the Type R logo. That's it. On the rear wing was the website accompanying this new initiative, concept, whatever you want to call it, myearthdream.com, which no longer exists. So you are forgiven for thinking, so they had no sponsors whatsoever. But this is the insane thing. They'd somehow managed to sign ENEOS, that's the Japanese oil company ENEOS, not the cleaning products people, which is INEOS. They'd also got Fila, the sportswear people, Ray-Ban, the purveyor of sunglasses, and Seiko watches, all sponsoring the team, without those sponsors getting any branding on the car. Whoever organised that must have had a very silver tongue, but how long would these companies want to stick around after not having their logos on show? Especially if the car did well. Even more especially after a very expensive 2006. They'd bought the F1 team off BAT, they'd spent God knows how much on Asimo the robot, a boatload of money on the private jet stuff, and then after buying the F1 team, they had to run the F1 team. Just as a bit of clarification here, the whole thing with Asimo was he was operational, out and about, being C3P Asimo, whatever you want to call it, as early as 2005. But in 2006 and then into 2007, Honda had spent big on new artificial intelligence technology that they then showed off in 2007. What it did was it allowed Asimo to talk to other Asimos. Honda's reasoning behind all of this was that 600 million people on average watch Formula 1 in some way or another at that particular point in time, and Honda wanted as many eyes on this initiative as possible. And climate awareness had actually been going on for some time, because South Park parodied the anti-deforestation stuff back in 1999. So, for want of a better term, Honda had gone woke before woke was a thing. But the reasoning had come from Honda F1 CEO Nick Fry, and many at the time thought, okay, who told you to say this and how much did they pay you? Because the whole Earth Dreams thing was seen as, you couldn't get a BAT replacement, could you? Remember HRT's Your Logo Here, This Could Be You livery scheme that they had in 2012? Basically the same concept. But My Earth Dreams wasn't so much a please look after the environment thing as such. What you did was sign up and pledge how you were going to change your lifestyle to help the environment. I mean, most people could start by just not lobbing crisp packets, cigarettes or Red Bull cans out of their cars when they're driving, or just dropping stuff on the ground in city centres. The bins are right there, what is wrong with you? In return, you got your name on the car and the names made up the livery. And Red Bull would do something similar with the Faces for Charity livery in 2012. But one thing that was also noted, the company was using high-revving, thirsty V8s, and that was contributing to CO2 levels. But they did raise nearly £100,000 to donate to environmental causes, so can't really fault them for that. At least they raised some money and gave it to somebody. So the thinking was Honda would improve from 2006 into 2007 and people would sign up to this cause based off what they'd seen because the car was now doing very, very well. But the car was a disaster in 2007. The 2007 Honda had a horrendous aero imbalance. Nick Fry said that the centre of pressure was moving under acceleration and braking, which I'm no aerodynamicist, but that doesn't sound good at all. Luckily, they figured out that this was an issue in testing and they could at least try and sort it all out over the course of the season, but they never did. Jensen scored all of Honda's points that year, with the team barely finishing above the so-called Honda B team of Super Aguri, who were, for all intents and purposes, running the 2006 car. In an interview, Jensen said that the team wasn't exactly organised. Apparently, they changed the side pods for aesthetic purposes, but never ran those new side pods through the wind tunnel. So it wasn't until testing that they realised they'd absolutely buggered it. Barrichello ended the season absolutely pointless, second last of the drivers who did the entire season. Davidson, in the other Super Aguri, was last of those drivers. The problems for Honda that year were so bad that in the opening 4 rounds of the season, there would be at least one Super Aguri in front of the 2 Hondas in qualifying, which is utterly embarrassing. And the best result of the season came when Button was 5th in China. In 2004 and 2005, the car had made the podium. In 2006, it had won a race. In 2007, disaster. But that didn't deter Honda from carrying on the initiative. The team was bolstered by the arrival of Ross Brawn, who had completed his gardening leave after leaving Ferrari at the end of 2006. But Ross didn't have much input in the 2008 car. Development of the car, sure, but the actual car? No. He arrived too late for that. The new updated 2008 car had ditched the giant Earth livery and shrunk it down to the side pods and more to the rear of the car instead, with the rest of the car painted white, having 2 green speed stripes down the nose. Despite opening up space on the car, the sponsors still weren't getting advertising space, with Earth and Dreams occupying the space on the car instead. But while the drivability of the car improved, the results didn't, for the most part. Honda did have a little bit of a purple patch between Spain and Silverstone, with Button finishing 6th at Barcelona and Barrichello scoring at Monaco, Canada, and then getting a podium at that race in the wet in Northamptonshire. After which, the car would only break the top 10 once, that being Button's 9th at the chaotic Singapore Grand Prix. And it's actually interesting to see on the results because I never realised this. The car is knocking on the door of the top 10 in the first half of the season, but after Silverstone, it goes backwards. At the same time, the global recession triggered by the subprime mortgage letting or whatever it was in the US hit the world quite hard, and the so-called credit crunch started to take effect. Honda, unable to justify the costs and looking at the company's own finances, decided to withdraw immediately from Formula One in the December of 2008, leaving Button and Barrichello potentially without a drive. But the team was eventually bought out by Ross Brawn for just £1 and went on to win the championship. So there was a silver lining at the end of it after all. But the Earth Dreams livery will go down like the 1999 BAR livery, and ironically, the Honda descended from the BAR. There will be some people out there that utterly despise the livery, and Martin Brundle once quipped that if they painted the car a proper colour, it would go faster. Some might say it's grown on them, some probably never minded it in the first place. But then you get into the same things about the 2008 livery as well. But I think fewer people mind the 2008 one compared to the 2007 one. But I'm sure there will be differing opinions in the comments. It was a bold thing to do, in a time where things were starting to really kick off with social media and online presences. But the thing is, they just didn't have the car to make their message work, or at least have their message get the eyes on it that they wanted on it. And with all the money that they'd spent on buying and running an F1 team, protocol droids and private jets, is it any wonder the credit crunch made them pull out? So then, a look at Honda's famous, or infamous, depending on how you look at it, Earth Dreams livery and how the car performance didn't exactly match to what they wanted to achieve with it. If this has been a fun look through the motorsport history books, then do give the video a like so I know a good job was done. And for more stuff from the channel, get subscribed with the bell on if it wants to work, because apparently it doesn't anymore, so you never miss out on anything else that I do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the rad lads at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help with the picture purchasing piggy bank or just keep the lights on around here, there's a link to Patreon in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliates and other bits and pieces you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks for any one and done sorts of donations and memberships if you want to do Patreon style support, but without going to Patreon. So until next time, I've been Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.